Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 300.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason. Here are your hosts, Richard Saunders and Stefan Sojka.
Richard.
Yes, Stefan.
I cannot beat that previous introduction. This is a double whammy introduction. I can't beat that on scale and volume.
You can't.
But
no.
I can match it on emotion.
Yes.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm welling up. I'm a wellspring of emotion.
Well.
Right. Well. And this 300th episode. Can you believe it?
No, I can't. I really can't. And thank you to the crowd at the amazing meeting in Las Vegas, the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. I was doing their auction.
Oh.
And I said, right, I'm going to use this opportunity. And I commandeered the crowd for a little while. And they did applause and they did laughter and they did boos.
Oh, you could sell that stuff for sound effects library.
I could. This is episode 300 of the Skeptic Zone.
300!
For the 20th of July 2014, which equates to almost 6 years. In a couple of weeks it'll be 6 years, but because of the 52 weeks of the year and all that sort of stuff, 300.
So you've actually been really doing it pretty much every single week since we started.
Since we started, yeah.
Have you sought professional help?
I did before I started, but did it do me any good?
No.
It did not do me any good. But you know what? I was just at the amazing meeting in Las Vegas, and the number of people who'd come up and find me and just say, thank you for doing the Skeptic Zone.
Really?
I listen to it when I'm jogging. I listen to it when I'm doing the dishes or walking the dog or on the bus or on the train. It's really, really nice.
So we're almost performing some sort of community service.
I think we are.
Keeping people company.
We're keeping people sane.
Yeah.
There are people listening to us right now on night shift. Hello, night shift workers.
Night shift workers. Keep up the good work.
That's it. Just keep listening. Keep listening. Now, Stefan, as you know, I go over to the States quite frequently, and I brought you back a little present. Here we go.
Look at that.
Let me open that up.
What are they called?
These are called... There we go. Goodness. I have one too. They're either called candy corn or corn candy.
Oh, that's absolutely delicious.
You can't...
You bought it for me, didn't you?
No, sorry.
There's half of them not gone already.
No.
You ate them on the way here.
They're pretty hard to find here, but in the States, they're everywhere. Bigger... yum. Big around Halloween. In fact, if you Google it now, I see you've got your computer open. Google corn. We'll make sure we got it right. It's either corn candy or candy corn.
Okay, corn candy.
Oh, it's delicious. And my nieces and nephews just love them. There they are.
Oh, look at that. Oh.
Corn candy.
Or candy corn.
Or candy corn. Candy corn, there it is.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, now, listeners might have heard my phone just go beep there for the message. That says, I'm getting live feeds from Brisskepticamp.
Oh, right.
Which is happening right now as we're recording this introduction.
Is that going to create more material for the 301st episode?
Or even the 300.
Oh,
because our reporter Jo Alabaster's on the spot.
She's on there doing it live right now.
Well, she's there. She's going to be reporting, doing interviews for the Skeptic Zone.
Okay.
And we're going to try and get them from there to here, which is pretty easy these days with Dropbox and things. And hopefully I'll be able to incorporate something from Brisskepticamp onto the Skeptic Zone. It's great to have a reporter there.
Okay, so this is Jo Alabaster. I'm at Brisbane Skepticamp, and we'd like to say... Congratulations! On 300 episodes to the Skeptic Zone.
You're almost a Time Lord. Because we're here doing an introduction to a show that hasn't even been produced yet. And people are listening to it.
Yes.
And they're going to be hearing stuff on the show that hasn't even been created yet. But while they're listening to it, we're introducing it. It's all happened already.
Yes. So what's your question? I'm sorry. Now, the big news, of course, last year we had Solar Flare. Skeptic Zone Productions Solar Flare was a great lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
And again, people at TAM were asking me, what happens next? When am I doing episode 2? What happens next? What happened to the poor crew?
We're going to tear the universe a new universe.
We go. So the answer to that is I don't know. I haven't written it yet, but I've got a few ideas. This year, of course, over the last few years, one of my big projects was the Vaccination Chronicles.
Yes.
The documentary.
Great project.
And I launched it live at TAM on the big stage. Oh. During part of my talk, I launched.
You lurched forward and launched it.
I lurched forward. Launched the Vaccination Chronicles. Now, my thanks to Skeptic Zone listeners who a couple of years back when I was starting to put this together, I realised that I've done video editing for years, as you know. I've done some from you. I've done lots of. But until recently, of course, it was all standard definition. The world's moved on.
That's right.
So I began to work on this project and realised that my standard definition software just couldn't cut it because I shoot in high definition now.
Right.
In fact,
HD,
I'm practically forced to.
Everything else. That's right. Yeah.
I've got a lovely standard definition camera, but that's old technology. So I put out a plea to Skeptic Zone listeners, and within a week, enough people had sent me donations to specifically for this for me to buy the software I needed.
Oh, fantastic!
It was fantastic, and all those people get a mention in the credits at the end of the Vaccination Chronicles. Look, here's my plea. Is it my request? If listeners have a blog or they can tweet, please tweet this documentary.
Yeah.
I think it's very important. It's all about people's stories about a time before vaccination and the horrors they saw and things like that.
The reality of it, yeah.
The reality.
And do you just go to YouTube and then just search for Vaccination Chronicles?
Oh, yeah, that's the easiest thing to do. In fact, if you just go to Google and type in the Vaccination Chronicles, you'll get straight to it. It'll come straight away.
Yeah.
I'll put a link on the Skeptic Zone page, of course, but if people can do that, I would be very grateful.
They won't get confused with that old Clint Eastwood movie, The Vaccination Chronicles, made in about 1973. Didn't do very well.
What?
After his Dirty Harry series.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he tried it. They wrote it. It was a pretty bad script, The Vaccination Chronicles. Yeah, there's a few aliens involved, I think, and lots of stabbings with needles. But I don't think you'll get confused. If they both come up, you'll know which one is yours.
Listeners, I think you'll understand which Clint Eastwood.
Well, I'm just wondering if any other searches would come up for The Vaccination Chronicles.
Why don't we give it a go? On your giant screen here, which takes up half the room, in the very room we did the very first episode of the Skeptic Zone from, I must say.
Yes, that's right.
This office here.
We're wasting our time here, but here we're
Vaccination Chronicles.
There you go.
We got the very first link is some sort of travel advisory,
and a whole bunch of links to your stuff.
Yep.
Great.
And the very first YouTube one is Vaccination Chronicles.
Yeah, no sign of Clint Eastwood anyway.
And I was so pleased that our good friend Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki
went there to TAM.
Not only did he go to TAM, which was fantastic, and he was a big hit, and people were running up and getting his autograph. It was really great. But he also appears in the documentary, The Vaccination Chronicles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which was really nice of him.
He's a good man.
He's a good man. I contacted him and he said, of course, I'll do it. And so listeners, please, as a plea from me, if you enjoy the Skeptic Zone, if we've kept you company over the last 6 years, if you could do that, because...
Absolutely. And I think, even though we weren't quite old, we're not quite old enough to have been at high risk of polio when we were kids, but I do remember having kids at my school in Calipers. I don't. You've got a few years on me, but I certainly, you hear the people in this video... Yeah, they're only a few years older than you.
Yeah. It was scary.
It's crazy. And actually, one of the guys in our Rotary Club, he's about 90-something now. Yeah. His wife succumbed to polio, and he ended up... He started the polio... End Polio Now thing.
Well, Rotary do a fantastic job.
That's right. Well, he chipped in $250,000 of his own money to kick the program off, and now Bill Gates has thrown in like $300 million, and so they're really going for it. But they're having a hard time because there's people, who are. That's the. I guess that's the dark side of anti-vaccination is that it pervades through to the really ignorant areas where you're actually trying to do it, where they can blame vaccinations on all kinds of things, voodoo and witchcraft, and they're spreading propaganda, or it's part of their war. Is they think that polio vaccination
is an evil plot and all the rest of it.
So it's the more people get the sort of information in your video, the better.
But anyway, this is it might be episode 300, but it's still an episode.
We've still got plenty. This intro is not going to go forever. We do actually get some real content, so let's do with that.
So coming up on this week's show, of course, we've got a Week in Science from the Royal Institution of Australia, a very popular segment.
Yes.
We've got some clips from Brisskepticamp with Jo Alabaster, which is really fantastic. And then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the audio from the documentary. Oh, because fantastic. The audio works just as well, and the message is you don't have to see anything.
No, just hear all the anecdotes and stories and things. Yeah.
And when you hear the audio, you'll understand how important it is. Have a look at the video then and spread the word.
Gotta love science. And if you're able to edit this introduction down to about a tenth of the actual length that we've made it by rambling on too much, there might even be a special 300th episode feature of Dr. Stefan Sojka.
Dr. Stefan Sojka!
He might be, in fact, I think this week...
Dr. Stefan Sojka!
I think he might be becoming a reverend.
Reverend Dr. Stefan Sojka.
I think he's reverend.
I used to like the old Dr. Stefan Sojka with his marvellous cures and devices.
I think he may be back this episode, but we'll just have to wait and see how you can edit this introduction down.
Now, I must say that I had such good intentions at the amazing meeting. I was going to interview lots of people. I did. I interviewed some people, but folks, I was so busy at the amazing meeting because I was helping with the $1 Million Challenge.
Oh, that's right, you were too.
And now I'm even busy writing the formal report on the whole event. That took hours and hours and hours of each day, and when I wasn't doing that, I was also giving a workshop with Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki. I was giving my own talk, main stage talk.
Yeah, busy.
I did an episode of the Skeptic Zone on the spot, and I launched the Vaccination Chronicles.
Oh, goodness me.
And then,
in how many days was that?
4
days. And you still found time to hang out at the bar.
And I still found time to hang out at the bar. But I just didn't get as many interviews at camp that I really hoped I would get. But you know what? I'll have to fly the whole team out next year.
Oh, I think you have to.
I'll have to.
I'll be on that one.
You'll be on that one?
Trip, yes. Sir.
But I reckon, you know what? While we go outside and eat the rest of this candy corn.
Oh, yes, please.
It's good. It's good, isn't it?
Let's just get on with it.
Let's do it.
Episode 300.
300.
Yeah.
This is Richard Saunders, producer of The Skeptic Zone. Before we get further into the show, I must say a special thanks to some people who have made this show possible over the years. I must thank all my reporters, of course, going right back 6 years, but especially...
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachel Dunlop.
Dr. Rachel Dunlop, who was with the show since episode 1. Dr. Rachie Reports has been a major part of the Skeptic Zone, and Dr. Rachie herself has proven herself to be a major force for skeptical activism, not only in Australia, but around the world. And also...
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Maynard, who's been with the show now for many years, doing tremendous work, so many reports, so many interviews, and always a pleasure to work with. Thank you, Dr. Rachie, thank you, Maynard, and thank you to all my reporters.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. This is the afternoon after Brisbane Skepticamp. Got to say, we're all a little bit tired. I'm here with Ross Balch, who is president of Brisbane Skeptic Society, with Phil Kent, who is the secretary of Brisbane Skeptic Society, and with Lauren Cochrane, who is the president of Canberra Skeptics. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
You.
So we're all feeling a little bit tired, admittedly, after a fantastic long day yesterday. It went really well, I think. Do you know how many people we had come through the door? Or you had come through the door?
I think we got up to 100 at one point.
I think we just broke the 100.
Fantastic.
And I think the guys at Brisbane Skeptic Society really deserve a massive round of applause from wherever you're listening to this podcast. Stand up and clap. I don't care if you're on the bus, but these guys, they need to just be applauded.
It was really amazing. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, this being my first Skepticamp, but it ran just so smoothly. Every single talk, frankly, was both interesting and eloquent, really engaging, I found.
I was extremely impressed with the quality of all the speakers, bearing in mind that a lot of them had never done that before.
Yes, you've really got to hand it to them to come up with something and present it so well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of not having done it before, I mean, this was Brisbane Skeptic Society's first big event, the Skepticamp, and it came together, I think, incredibly well on the day. How long were you guys working on this?
I think we've been mulling the idea over for, nearly 2 years or something?
Yeah, I mean,
it's really come together maybe 5 or 6 months ago that the ball really started rolling.
I mean, essentially what we did is we booked a venue, and that gave us a deadline. And after that, we announced it to everybody, and then we knew we had to get it done. And countless
backing out.
Countless skeptics in the pub meetings later, and brainstorming ideas, and it all came together, really.
And too many beers.
Too many beers, yeah.
How long has Brisbane Skeptical Society been going for? Because I understand that you've got a couple of groups up here now in Brisbane.
I think officially a month, actually. We're very new at the Brisbane Skeptic Society.
Yeah.
It just seemed right for us, didn't it, to sort of start our own group. And
we've been doing it at informal Skeptics in the pub for at least a couple of years.
And what night is that on?
That's the first Tuesday of every month at the Plough Inn at South Bank near the city. We've also started a new one at Chermside, which is on
the north side. The third Wednesday of every month.
I should know that.
Excellent. So 2 events per month at the moment, and Skepticamp.
Yes, and we're hoping to do more.
More.
We have some plans on the horizon for more skeptical content for the Brisbane community, and this is to augment as well the Q Skeptics who meet on the last Monday of every month.
Okay, where are they?
They're at the Red Brick Hotel.
Red Brick.
Yes, and they usually have a really interesting speaker. And
do you tend to get speakers in, or is yours more an informal chat and
at the moment we're much more informal. We like to sit around and just chinwag, and the topics are amazingly varied. Not always sceptical, but always interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Talking about varied topics, and that was the smoothest segue in the history of podcasting, I'm sure. There were 14 talks yesterday at Brisbane Skepticamp, and there was a fairly wide range of different topics covered. We had swordsmanship, we had the placebo effect, we had why people believe non-scientific claims, we had Chris Stevenson talking about skeptical weight loss methods, which I'm assuming don't involve taking Sensaslim. And we also had parenting skeptically, and Lauren here presented that one.
Yes, no, that was definitely an interesting topic. As I said in my talk yesterday, it's been 3 years since I first fell pregnant, and just the last 3 years particularly, it's just amazing how much crap parents are subjected to.
It really is. I mean, I've also spoken about this, and strangely enough, Lauren and I managed to have barely any crossover in what we spoke about. There's that much of it, 20 minutes each, and we've got a lot more lined up as well.
Absolutely.
Do we want to do an announcement?
I think we can. I mentioned yesterday at the end of our talk that... my talk.
Your talk.
Our talk.
Take ownership.
me and all my multiple personalities on stage decided to... No, Jo, myself, Alison Gaylard, Heidi Robertson, Kat Steele and Shelley Stocken are going to be writing a book called Parenting Skeptically, or something similar. We haven't decided on a title yet, but it's basically going to be having a look at all the pseudoscience and old wives' tales surrounding pregnancy and parenting, and hopefully giving new mums and dads a bit of a handy guide to evaluating dodgy claims. And I think it's really, really critical for people raising kids to be aware that there is so much dodgy claims and bullshit out there that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've had discussions in the past about a lot of books, along the lines of what to expect when you're expecting, etc. Just, there are some dodgy things in there, and these are sort of the gold standard. That's not looking at sort of alternative kind of ideas or anything, but the mainstream books, not necessarily advice you'd want to follow.
But there were so many great talks yesterday, and it's all, all credit to these guys for the fantastic curation that they did beforehand. It's good to hear a couple of people like Loretta Marin and Chris Stevenson, who of course have, lots of public speaking experience, particularly at these sort of skeptical and even atheist events, and then even just to have new speakers like myself and Alison.
Alison Gaylard, she spoke from the Northern Rivers Vaccination supporters. Sorry, I was staring at an ibis. There are ibises. We're sitting in a park here in the Botanical Gardens in Brisbane at the moment. I was staring at an ibis. Northern Rivers Vaccination supporters. She gave an absolutely wonderful talk. I'm going to admit here, I teared up a little bit. She was discussing what it's like for her living in an area with incredibly low vaccination rates and a lot of anti-vaccination sort of people in her community, and the fact that her daughters contracted whooping cough, although they were immunised, herd immunity being very low in the area. They copped it, she copped it, and that experience, when you're hearing that from somebody who's had it firsthand, is actually quite confronting. She did a wonderful job and also made me laugh a couple of times, which is always wonderful. We also had Heidi White, who was discussing chiropractors, and I wasn't quite aware of how much of a lifestyle kind of involvement is in chiropractic practice.
It was very surprising, wasn't it? And it was extremely interesting to get the inside scoop, so to speak, from someone on the other side who actually has this very personal experience with, with this kind of thing. And it just shows you, from her talk, how these kind of alternative modalities, they lock you in, by making it a lifestyle. And I'm sure it's all part of the business plan that they have.
Yeah, certainly.
And just hearing about that annual treatment package that they offered, that was...
paying in advance for a year's worth of chiropractic treatment, which meant you get sort of, I think it was a weekly or bi-weekly adjustment. And then as you go, if something happens to you, say you trip down the stairs or something such, you can go in and have that adjustment, and they keep... return trips, return customers. It's very strange. I wasn't quite aware that it was that involved, but Heidi was telling us this because her experience prior to, I guess, getting involved in, being sceptical of chiropractic ideas, she was actually a chiropractor's assistant. And I frankly really appreciate that people are willing to talk about things from their past that aren't necessarily things that sort of as skeptics we're, down with, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I was very impressed that a lot of people there were sharing their sort of war stories, so to speak, of the sort of the previous life, in the other side, or the sort of the woo community, if you want to put it that way, and especially to a group of skeptics, to be able to admit that, I think is very useful as a group to understand those experiences, because if we don't understand, then we're never going to be able to fight effectively against it.
Absolutely. And also another thing I appreciated was Loretta Marin from the Friends of Science in Medicine was talking to us about Friends of Science in Medicine, and she mentioned a couple of times that not necessarily everybody who's an alternative medicine practitioner is either out to fool people or out to harm people or out to take their money. And I think that that's incredibly important to keep in mind. It's easy to view people as sort of have a very cynical outlook on some practitioners, perhaps, thinking that, they're out to con people or take their money, etc. But generally, I think it might be handy to give people the benefit of the doubt and think, okay, well, they've fallen for this too. Whether they have a responsibility to understand that it's not necessarily something that's evidence-based or not is another story. But generally, people do tend to have good intentions, I think. I might just be a bit optimistic. I imagine that customers or patients, I'm not sure whether they refer to them as either, clients may feel quite obliged to keep going throughout the year because they've already paid for it, and they're making more of an emotional investment in the treatment because of that. So they're more likely to make another financial investment. I'm not sure.
So you're emotionally and financially invested in this enterprise. So when it comes time to renewal...
But it was also interesting, Heidi was discussing basically how she had a bit of a turnaround and stopped believing in subluxation theory and started doubting the idea of chiropractic. And I find these stories absolutely fascinating because I spend a lot of time wondering how we can approach people, talk to people, and sort of very gently challenge their beliefs that aren't necessarily evidence-based without putting them offside. I mean, you're always going to polarise some people and push them away by suggesting that what they've invested in isn't necessarily real or, evidence-based, but...
It was a very good cautionary tale about almost how not to approach it. I mean, she was very specific in saying her husband, I believe, is the one who had been sceptical, I think, for the entirety of her involvement. And she said if he had been confronting and a bit more aggressive about it, she probably would have never got to the position she is today, and that it was through gentle sort of persistence, really. We say this all the time, don't we? It's planting the seed.
Yeah.
And eventually it's bound to grow, even if it's only in 1 in every 10 people we talk to.
Yeah.
I found that valuable in John Cook's talk, how he was talking about the ways that people can have science communicated to them in a... what was the analogy he was using? Vitamins and immunisation shots?
His ideas on sticky information, sticky science was, I think, very valuable too for skeptics to take note of, because he's very good at presenting information in a way which is very media friendly and is very general public friendly, and we could definitely learn a few lessons from the way he's dealing with climate change denial in other aspects of things that we're tackling.
And so I understand that the talks we've just been discussing here, are they going to be available online for people to listen to or watch?
They're certainly going to be available through time. We did our best to make good audio and video recordings of the event so that anyone who didn't attend can still benefit from the information that was presented, and they'll be going out on Brisskepticamp.org over time.
Fantastic. And is the Facebook page still going to be operational so people can follow, or there's Twitter as well?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, we're definitely planning on another event, so watch the Brisskepticamp Facebook page and Twitter for more information.
Thank you very much for joining me. It was a fantastic day yesterday. It was a long day yesterday. I wish it wasn't over, but simultaneously, I think I need to go and lie down for a bit now. Ross, Phil, Lauren, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jo.
Hey, Kenny.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Nice day at this park, yeah?
Yes, great weather.
Oh, look, a unicorn.
Unicorn? There are no such things as unicorns, silly.
Yes, there is.
No, there isn't.
Hey, guys, what are you arguing about?
Tom thinks unicorns are real.
They so are.
Let's look this up in the Skeptics Dictionary.
The what?
How can we do this in this park? There is no computer here.
You guys probably don't know about the Skeptics Dictionary app. Available now for iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch in the App Store.
Wow, cool.
The app lets you access all of the great Skeptics Dictionary articles when you're on the go. Here, let me look up unicorns.
Oh, cool. Kenny, prepare to be proven wrong.
It says here, the unicorn is a creature from fables.
Aha!
Actually, I see now that someone just dumped their ice cream cone on that horse's head.
Thanks,
Skeptics Dictionary iPhone app.
Hi, I'm Reverend Stefan Sojka from the Charismatic Church of Our Lord Jesus the Martyred Lamb Hamburger Joint and Chapel beside the Sydney to Newcastle Freeway. I've been asked by Jesus and by Living Ministry Software and Investment Corporation to speak to you today about our Lord, praise be to Jesus. We've all heard of the face of Jesus being found in a piece of toast, a sheet, or a soiled nappy. Well, get ready, because Jesus is going to start being seen everywhere. Introducing Living Ministry Software and Investment Corporation's Jesus Face Recognition Software version 1.2 beta, Lord be praised. Through a state government software development grant I applied for and wrote myself into the proposal for a healthy consulting fee, Living Ministry Software and Investment Corporation have created the ultimate way to recognise Jesus' face in anything. Jesus Face Recognition Software version 1.2 beta at only €899 connects directly to any camera or scanner via USB once you have manually installed and configured the unrecognised non-compliant drivers, and can browse any computer image library of unlimited size, detect and spuriously interpolate literally millions of instances of Jesus' face within your photo collection. We have developed an algorithm, praise Jesus, that looks for lines, points, shapes, colours and shading that might even remotely correspond across a huge spectrum of tentative, partial or longbow geometric and biometric matches to its built-in database of 700 million different images of Jesus, right-click saved from Google Images. Your files are then superimposed with the matching Jesus face image, ready to print out instantly and send to your local newspaper. Never again do you need to rely on your own brain's primitive pattern recognition faculties to see Jesus on the toilet wall. Now you can snap that photo with your iPhone and harness the power of Living Ministry Software and Investment Corporation's state-of-the-art facial recognition algorithms to find him. Hallelujah. Jesus Face Recognition Software version 1.2 beta is so powerful it can pick out an image of Christ with the same or even better accuracy than an astrologer. If you thought tracing the minute detail of a scorpion's exoskeleton out of 18 points of light in the sky was amazing, just try feeding your own wedding photos into our software application. Jesus will be revealed in the entree, the red wine stains on the tablecloth, and you might even find Jesus' face is an exact match overlay on the celebrant yours truly's face, since I did get one of those caricature artists at the local markets to draw me looking a bit like Jesus with a halo and crown of thorns a few months back, and uploaded the image to Flickr, Picasa, Pinterest, Instagram and my own webpage, naming it jesusface.jpg to ensure Google would pick it up. If you order now, we'll throw in for free our full set of expansion packs, the baby Jesus, Mother Mary, Moses and yes, even God himself. And coming soon, Jesus Face Recognition Software version 2, where we plug it into a pair of wearable goggles so you can live your entire life bombarded by images of Jesus overlaid onto your augmented reality. In this version, we will also be adding the Satan expansion pack so you can know just how tenuous your grip on salvation is, with temptation literally everywhere. But fear not, it's nothing that a visit to the charismatic Church of Our Lord Jesus the Martyred Lamb hamburger joint and chapel beside the Sydney to Newcastle freeway, and a special one-on-one spiritual healing in the motel room out the back can't fix. H-A-double hockey sticks, E hockey stick, U hockey stick, yah.
The Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian skeptics. Subscribe online to the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. Visit www.skeptics.com.au and click the publications link. You can also find there over 30 years of back issues free to download. The Skeptic, the magazine from Australian skeptics.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Most of us know the number pi is a mathematical constant that relates the circumference of the circle to its diameter. But what's this number used for in the real world? Let's find out. Pi is found in many mathematical formulas, especially where curves are involved. But it is also used in many applied fields of science such as engineering, astronomy, telecommunications and statistics. For instance, the construction of any curved surface requires engineers and architects to use pi in order to get the pieces to fit together. But it is also used to calculate the structural strength of beams and columns, power outputs of machinery, and even engineering problems associated with vibrations. In astronomy, pi has been used for hundreds of years to calculate orbits and distances between objects in our solar system and beyond. Closer to home, pi is essential for navigation and global positioning because our planet is spherical and moves in a circular orbit. Pi is even used in some fields to calculate probability. Statistical distributions are normally described by, you guessed it, curves, and pi can be used to create virtual simulations. And finally, if you're tuning into AWIS this week by Wi-Fi or radio, the waves carrying our signal also have a fundamental relationship with pi. And now, 4 fast facts about pi, of the mathematical kind. Pi is also a very special number because its decimal representation never descends into a repeating pattern. It just goes on forever. To date, pi has been calculated to over 10 trillion digits. Pi is both an irrational and transcendental number, meaning no two numbers can be multiplied together to make pi. 41 digits of pi is enough to calculate the circumference of the visible universe to a margin of error equal to the width of a proton. That's it for This Week in Science. For more information on pi, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au, follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Steve Kern. We'll catch you next week.
Did you see that UFO sighting that made the news? What did that latest study about alternative treatments really say? Is this photo making the rounds real or a hoax? Doubtful News is a unique website featuring news about pseudoscience, the paranormal, anomalies, and questionable claims framed with a skeptical view. Come visit doubtfulnews.com every day for news about cryptozoology, conspiracies, shams, scams, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Doubtful News. Critical thinking is essential in assessing today's news. Doubtful News helps you decide, can you really believe this stuff?
The Vaccination Chronicles, If Only, featuring interviews with Verna Morris, Maureen Chuck, Ken McLeod, Monica Saville, Dr. Richard Gordon, Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, John Bundock, Peter Bowditch, and Lauren Cochrane.
Hello, I'm Richard Saunders. Welcome to the Vaccination Chronicles. In this video, I'd like to tell you about a time in our history, not so long ago, when parents lived with the very real fear that at any time their children could succumb to the deadly effects of infectious diseases. I'd like to tell you what it was like back then, but I really can't. I wasn't there. I was born after the widespread introduction of vaccination for diseases such as pertussis, which is whooping cough, diphtheria, rubella, tuberculosis, and infantile paralysis, poliomyelitis, polio. So we need to hear from people who were there, people who even lost members of their family, and not just babies and children, to diseases we hardly hear about today. We'll also hear from some others about some of the fears and misconceptions, both real and invented, about modern vaccination. It seems that there's no end of bad information out there, especially on the internet. But now, let's hear from some people who have seen firsthand the effects of vaccine-preventable diseases.
My mother died of TB at the age of 19, and I was 15 months old. I never ever knew her, never knew my mother. And her two brothers, in periods, varying periods after that, died of the same disease. They, I think one was up to about 10 or 11 years after that. But everybody had it just about, you know, it was just like measles was to later to the next generation. And But they did. Anyway, once you get rid of these things, you don't want to get them back. You want them to stay out, like smallpox and things like that we don't have anymore. But we did have them.
This is early 50s, and I'm about 5 or 6. And I can remember sitting at the dining table, and there's a doctor talking to my father, who's standing up. And the doctor's telling my dad, my baby sister's got polio. And the look of horror on his face, and I can hear my mother sobbing in the bedroom, because this is the worst possible news. And I remember going up to the Townsville Hospital, the three of us, to go and visit my baby sister, and she's lying in a bed in a hospital ward, and it appeared to my child's brain there were dozens of kids, and this was a polio ward. This wasn't all the illnesses and accidents that were around. This was an entire ward devoted to children. As luck would have it, she was well cared for and she recovered. But I can remember going to school about the same time. And it was after the holidays, and we all get back and we're saying hello to kids that we hadn't seen for a few weeks. And I'm saying, "Where's Billy? Where's Tommy?" And someone said, "Oh, they've got the polio." And that was all people needed to say, because you knew that you'd probably never see them again. And I never did. And I gather that they died.
There was a girl in my class who had calipers as a result of polio. I remember I started that school in first class, so she must have had it when she was much younger. And also I remember a friend of mine's father who'd had polio, and he had one really withered leg. You know, it was like half the size of the other leg, and he had this funny gait to sort of accommodate for that.
Well, when I was 11, that was 1951, I just felt very sick one day at school. I went home, and my mother did what all good mothers would do, put a child to bed. I had a very high fever and my back was aching. I was really very, very sick. The doctor was called, and I can remember the doctor checking out arms and legs bending, and also the doctor asked me to sit up, which was very painful, and to put my chin on my chest, and I couldn't do that. And immediately he said to my parents, she must go to hospital. It was the Wagga Base Hospital. It was 25 miles away, 40 kilometres away, and a spinal tap revealed that I had polio. This was absolutely horrifying because there hadn't been any cases of polio in my little town at all. There'd been one in the country, a young fellow aged 34, a farmer, and he died. And the whole town was reeling. And now here was Monica with polio. Where did I get it from? Nobody knows.
Well, my mother was a nurse before marriage, and she nursed in isolation hospitals. And she saw children dying of tuberculosis, polio, diphtheria, and other diseases. My father was the eldest of 5 children. When he was 20, in 1939, his only sister, the youngest in the family, died of diphtheria at the age of 2.5. So I was brought up with stories of kids dying of diphtheria, those my mother had seen and of course my father's experience. I'm the oldest of 6 children. When the youngest was born, we had whooping cough. I remember my little baby sister gasping for breath, a little black surgical belt around her belly holding in her navel, which had become herniated as a result of the strain of the coughing. She was very seriously ill, and these days almost certainly would be hospitalised. But my mother, having been an ex-nurse, they probably thought that she was as well looked after at home as otherwise. And I remember the whooping cough, the and then the coughing, and then the vomiting. Must have been very hard for my mother, just having given birth to a child and having to look after six kids, sick kids as well.
A personal example from my own family is my cousin Philip. When he was young, he fell over, hurt his leg, came back to his parents and said, "I've got a sore leg." They panicked. Their first thought was polio. Took him to the doctor, no problem at all. All he'd done was hurt himself from falling over. 2 days later, his very best friend Frank, who lived 2 streets away, had the same experience. He fell over, sore leg, his parents took him to the doctor, polio. Frank died in 2012, he'd spent his life in a wheelchair. This was a very, very scary disease and people were very, very worried about it, with good cause.
I remember when I was in Nimbin working as a medical student helping a doctor, and in came, so I was just work experience, as part of the medical rotation, and in came 2 parents and this kid, 16-year-old kid. Obviously, from the way he was walking, he had polio. It was a very characteristic walk, quite different from a Parkinson's walk, from a stroke walk. Quite obvious. And we looked at each other and we didn't say a single thing, the doctor and I. And then they went through the story about how they just come back from India, and then the doctor asked a few questions, and he said, and have you been vaccinated against polio? No. And he said, okay, and then he did a few tests. And then he said, look, it's pretty obvious to me that your child has polio. And the parents got so upset. They didn't want to believe. They started firstly being rational and saying things like, well, there's no such disease as polio. And then they started saying things like, well, polio doesn't exist anymore because we all live better. There is no infectious disease such as polio and you can't get it. And then they started kicking chairs a little bit and then stormed out. They did not want to live with the fact that by not vaccinating their kid against polio, they had then paralysed their kid in one leg by taking him to India.
So at Wagga Base Hospital, there really was no treatment for a person with polio. I had a high fever and I was just put onto a flat bed, no pillow, and told to stay there. And I was too sick to go anywhere anyway. So I just stayed there, and eventually I was moved out onto a veranda because more people needed to be inside. People who no longer had a fever were being moved onto verandas. I mean unenclosed verandas with just gauze and blind down. But always near me was a horrible barrel-looking thing, which they said to me was an iron lung. And they said that I might need that because the polio I had was in the throat and in my speech. I couldn't swallow, couldn't talk properly, and that's the one that tends to go down into the lungs very quickly. And so I was really thrilled one day when the iron lung wasn't there because I thought, oh, good, I don't need it anymore. But of course somebody did.
And I can remember the 50s where people lived in dread of these terrible illnesses that just took so many people. Walk through an old cemetery and look at the headstones of who died and how old, and you're looking at babies that died. And that's basically all gone.
At the beginning of the 20th century, infant mortality in Australia was over 10%. Can you imagine it? More than 1 in 10 babies died, many of those from vaccine-preventable diseases. What would their parents have given to protect their children? Reports like these were commonplace in the newspapers of the time. It was sad, but no surprise to anyone. Over the course of the 20th century, important health measures were introduced that saw this mortality rate plummet. Chief amongst these was widespread vaccination. I'd like to read to you something I discovered while I was doing research for this documentary, and this comes from the Perth Daily News, dated April 1903. Coughing dislocates a neck. In certifying a child's death to the Southwark coroner, a medical man reports that the deceased had been under treatment for whooping cough. Death was due to a broken neck, and in the absence of any definable cause, the doctor was forced to the conclusion that the child dislocated its neck during a violent fit of coughing.
I remember when I was in the first batch of kids in Wollongong to get vaccinated. We all got put on buses in primary school and then got shipped down to the Pioneer Hall, and then they stabbed all of us. And in my class there was a kid who had calipers, and there were 2 more kids in the school who had been hit by polio. Polio only gets about 0.5% of everybody that infects. So it infects the population, but only about 0.5% of them actually come down with the neurological symptoms. And these were the 3 kids from our school. And it was only years later I realised that all the parents standing around had deliberately, as an act of the society, given up the chance to have them vaccinated and protected against polio so that we, their children, could get saved. What a generous bunch of parents they were.
About a year after my sister came home, there was an announcement that a vaccine had been invented for polio. And it was like a huge cloud had been lifted from the suburbs, because there'd been this cloud of gloom and doom. It was the dread that your child would be the next to come down with polio. And at last there was hope. And very soon after, all of us kids were taken up to the school and we were lined up on the verandas, about 100 of us, and we all got our jabs. And polio just disappeared. The gloom had lifted, and it wasn't even a subject for discussion anymore. And you saw the occasional child or adult with calipers and so on, but that's all there was. Polio just disappeared as if it was magic. But it wasn't magic. It was science at work.
These days, the decision to vaccinate is not a hard one, but some people aren't convinced. In a way, vaccination has become a victim of its own success, with people wondering why. Why in this day and age, why would they vaccinate? Because diseases like whooping cough, although dramatically decreased, are still with us and are still claiming lives. And yet there are people, especially in developed countries with low rates of infection, who are vehemently opposed to vaccination, claiming it's responsible for everything from autism to SIDS to even shaken baby syndrome. Unbelievably, some people deny vaccination has prevented any disease whatsoever.
There's almost no data for significant damage caused by vaccines, any more than anyone having an injection of any sort. Most of those reactions to injections are caused by fainting. If your child's not vaccinated, it's fine so long as no one else comes to this country and brings the disease with them. If someone comes in from another country or the virus gets away some other way, then it's possible that an epidemic can occur. And of course, many of these illnesses, and perhaps not all of them, but many of these illnesses are life-threatening. And if you have 15% of the infant population getting a disease like measles, you're going to have deaths. And there'll be a number of deaths. Measles can be is a life-threatening illness, and of course polio much more so, tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough. Whooping cough, has quite a high mortality, and of course polio has a very high mortality and a very long morbidity. And so if we suddenly have 15% of our population susceptible to these illnesses, then of course all sorts of disasters can occur for the children. And so by not vaccinating your child, you not only put your own child at risk, but you put at risk the children who have also gone to the trouble of being vaccinated. Because some of them, because of their immune system or whatever, will actually be susceptible to the disease.
One of the persistent myths about vaccines and the dangers of vaccines is that vaccination causes autism, or certain vaccines cause autism. There have been dozens of studies done that have shown no connection. What the connection is simply coincidence. Autism is detected at about the age when some of the earlier vaccines are given. It's not something you can usually detect early, although in some cases you can. There's just been a recent study done where an analysis of as many studies as you could find by an academic from Sydney University. And what he found was that when you put them all together and collected all the information, it just became stronger. There is no connection between vaccination and autism. So it can be detected early, but the normal time for detection, and it's just normally to do with the developmental stages of children, that they don't show the signs of autism until they're about sometimes like 2 or 3 years old. And that's when they started to get a lot of the vaccines. It's a myth, and it's a myth which should be stomped on and should stop their being repeated.
But there's people out there who are bitterly opposed to vaccination, and they have all sorts of reasons. They object to the science, they object to the socialisation of it. But the thing is, they don't know what it's like. I'm one of the last of the generation that saw these things right up close. I saw it in my father's face, I saw it in my mother's. I saw it in my school friends who wore calipers, who I never saw again. It just doesn't happen today. Why are these people so bitterly opposed to vaccination? They don't know what they're talking about. They have all these reasons that just don't make sense. They're just rubbish. Get your child vaccinated. See a real doctor, not a crank. See a real doctor. Get their immunisation program. Get them up to date. Keep them up to date. And you won't see what I saw when I was 5 years old.
The first thing to realise about vaccinations is that they were invented by human beings. They're not perfect. Nothing made by humans is perfect. But overwhelmingly, the odds are in your favour if you get vaccinated. I've got my kids vaccinated. I tell everybody to get their kids vaccinated. They're not perfect. You'll have a fever, maybe something else. But overwhelmingly, the odds are in your favour, simply because nothing made by humans is perfect. But the odds are in your favour. Get vaccinated.
It's so important. Like just a little needle, and then their children, they've taken away all the worry against them getting these things. You think they might die. I remember two of my children having whooping cough together, and that was a very worrying time.
If our grandmothers knew that there was a treatment or prevention for the diseases that their children died from, and we weren't accessing those, they would kick us from here into next week.
The diseases we've been talking about can affect children for the rest of their lives. Even when all the symptoms are gone, part of the disease can linger in the body for decades, only to return later in life. A very nasty visitor from the past.
Now, poliomyelitis, polio infantile paralysis, it's been called too, involves the muscles. It involves the paralysis of the muscles. And often these are the muscles of the lungs, the breathing apparatus in a person that's affected. So in order for a person to stay alive, it was necessary to put polio victims into an iron lung. And this forced the air into and out of a person. And for many, many people, lying on their back, flat on their back, looking at the world through a mirror, eating in there, was their life. Many people who went into iron lungs never ever came out of iron lungs. But many people did spend their entire life in there. And they might have been allowed out just a little while with assisted breathing to have a shower, have a bath, a sponge bath, go to the toilet perhaps. But most spent their lives after they were in an iron lung and stayed there. I understand that very few came out of them. In some hospitals there were rooms full of iron lungs, helping people to breathe with that awful sound of compression and like a pump going to pump air into people and out of people. I think they've been refined in recent times. I don't know what they're used because there's just not the incidence of polio around. But it was certainly a horrific thing to see an iron lung waiting for you at the end of your bed. And this is what you may need. And I was very determined to get well, so I didn't need an iron lung.
One of our latest vaccines, or newest vaccines, has been the herpes zoster virus vaccine, which is the herpes zoster is the virus that causes chickenpox and can recur later and come out as shingles, which is a rather nasty inflammation of the skin. So children or people who are infected with chickenpox, the chickenpox virus, after the illness is over, the chickenpox virus doesn't completely leave us. It hides in the roots of our nerves, in what's called the ganglia of the nerve. So you have a nerve which goes to your fingertips, or say to your chest, and that nerve arises in your spinal cord, and back near your spinal cord there's the nerve ganglion, and so the virus will retreat there until for some reason your immunity drops enough or something happens to you, there's some stressor, and the virus will then migrate along the nerve to where the nerve ends on your skin and burst through and attack your skin, causing blistering and pain and a nasty rash, and so you'll get a patch of blistered, burnt skin. Now, this can be very unpleasant anywhere, but it can sometimes occur on the face. If it occurs on the face, you can get scarring and disfigurement, and it can even sometimes affect the eye, and you can get herpes zoster in the eye, and you can cause loss of vision. Now, that can be quite a nasty late consequence of infant infection with, say, herpes zoster virus or chickenpox. Many people think, chickenpox is a benign illness. All my family had it in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, and none of them had any problem. Well, mostly that's the case, but two things. One is that there is still the odd case of herpes zoster pneumonia, and children have died from herpes zoster lung infection when everyone thought they just had the ordinary old chickenpox. But then much later on, when those same infected people reach their 60s, 70s and 80s, they can burst out with a nasty dose of shingles. And it's hoped that the herpes zoster virus, by preventing chickenpox, preventing the actual seeding of these viruses into our nerves, that we won't be susceptible to those bouts of shingles in later life.
When my son was 5 weeks old, he contracted viral meningitis, and I spent 5 sleepless nights in the hospital listening to him cry, and he was bright red, and you could just tell he was so afraid, and it was a really stressful time for me. He had a spinal tap. You don't want to have that happen to a tiny little baby. And to think that there are babies out there that might contract a vaccine-preventable disease, it terrifies me. And that's why I vaccinate, because I want to protect my kids and I want to protect other people's kids. If there was a vaccine for viral meningitis, I would have given that to both of my kids, no question. It was just an awful thing to experience, and I really don't want to wish that on any other parent or any other child to go through that.
You have an important decision to make whether to vaccinate or not, and that makes you very lucky. For the luxury of having this decision was not available to most of your ancestors and is still not available to parents in many developing parts of the world. I hope you'll remember the stories from the people in this video. I hope you'll never know the fear and the sorrow that was part of their lives, and I hope you'll never have to say, if only.
Richard, 300 episodes, almost over.
And I noticed the candy corn is almost gone.
I know. That's the last time I accept a gift from you without locking it up after you've given it to me. Because if you've eaten most of them after giving it to me, they are very tasty.
I don't know why they don't have them here in all the shops. They're really good.
Yeah, how come?
I don't know. Maybe we should start importing them.
Yeah, I think to open up another arm of the Skeptic Zone.
Yeah. Now I'm going to
confectionery import.
Actually, talking about confectionery, I'm going to use my own podcast for a blatant plug, so I'm allowed to. So why not?
Go for it.
Those of you in the States, have a look around the shops. You might notice a new chocolate arrive called Yowies.
Yeah. Oh.
And these are the chocolates you open up, and inside is a little plastic animal.
An Australian animal.
Oh, Australian animals, worldwide animals.
Oh.
Yeah, and the chocolate's great. And the only reason I mention it is because my brother is the zoological advisor. Consultant.
So he's still going for it with the Yowies. That's amazing.
Yeah. They used to be sold here in Australia, and they were very successful, and now they're being launched in the States.
Oh, yeah. So I was working with Jeff way back on their first website back in 1998 or something crazy.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Good heavens.
Look, what a small world it is.
But anyway, they're back.
Check them out.
Yowies are back.
Oh, they're huge.
They're good.
Yeah.
And
educational as well.
Whereas years ago here in Australia, when you opened up the little chocolate and inside there was a little figure you snapped together. Arms and legs. And These ones are the complete model, but they're absolutely lifelike. Amazingly.
Probably 3D printed.
Well, maybe. But, when you put it down, they look like, if you sort of squint your eyes, they look like a little animal sitting on the table.
Wow, that's
all the
fantastic.
proportions are
quality.
correct, the colours are correct, the fur. It's astonishing.
That's amazing.
Anyway.
And they're educational too, aren't
they? They're educational.
They try to introduce all the different species and things to the kids.
Yeah. So there you go, a little plug. If you want to write to me and accuse me of conflict of interest and favouritism, you can write to somebody else. I don't care.
Well, just like a little vaccination goes down with a sugar cube, so does a little bit of science go down with an egg full of chocolate.
It does.
Yeah.
Now, before we go,
yes,
I needed to clear up some a bit of confusion out there. It's a minor little bit of confusion. The Skeptic Zone is a private venture by me, with your help and other people, reporters, and is not. It is affiliated with the Australian Skeptics. A lot of people get confused about that.
It's an independent production.
It's independent, so the views... And I'm going to do a new tail end disclaimer soon. Basically, the views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics, and vice versa.
I'm glad you cleared that up.
It's confusing because I'm in the Skeptics, Iran's in the Skeptics, Dr. Raichi's in the Skeptics. Look, a lot of people got a bit confused about that, but no, it's two different
things. That's good because I was armed with a whole stack full of lawsuits against the rest of the team. I thought I'd be able to tap into the Skeptics' bank accounts, but it's just not going to happen, so I give up. It's not going to happen. It's all independent. No one's got any money.
So before we go, I guess our biggest thanks must stay and go to our listeners who have been with us now. Well, many of you, of course. Many of you have only recently learned about it or over the years. But there are listeners out there who have been with the show for 300 episodes.
We've grown up together.
We have, since 2008.
Actually, I've grown up a lot since I was 40. Hang on. Actually,
we don't want to even think about it.
I've grown up quite a lot since I was 45.
I think I was only 22 when this show started myself. But
feels like it.
The listeners. Because they're the ones who listen, they're the ones who download the show, keep the figures up, who help contribute, some of them with micropayments, which is really appreciated. I appreciate that very much. Who spread the word, and you're the people who put your headphones on, or you're in your car and you're
actually
with us.
Tune in consistently. And what's great is I think that we've probably spawned a few other skeptic shows around the place, to just showing that it can be done.
Yes.
And we're part of that sort of overall skeptical movement of this information dissemination and the entertainment as well, which kind of gets the cultural side of it.
Absolutely. And, I like to think the show's entertaining as well.
Yeah, but it's actually, if you look through the history since the show started, it's been quite a few breakthroughs, landmark decisions, and against the anti-vax movement, and certain products have been like legislated against, and that sort of thing. So it's actually making a difference.
I think so. I hope so. And just as we speak, another message from Brisskepticamp. Lauren Cochrane, the president of Canberra Skeptics, is up to speak next in Brisbane. That's
excellent.
Good for you, Lauren. Excellent. And our reporter Jo Alabaster is sending hugs. So isn't that nice?
The Time Lord rides again. We're doing the outro of the show, announcing what's in the show that hasn't been put together yet. It's just phenomenal.
Folks, you have no idea what goes on behind the scenes of the Skeptic Zone. You have no idea.
Well, we better move on and look forward to episode 301.
301
in about 6 years' time.
That's right.
Next week.
Next week.
Okay.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you. See ya.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone, Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone, a miracle of technology. A universe of reason, the Skeptic Zone.
So, as I said, that
whoa. That's recording.
Yeah, so what you'll hear on the show is that straight off, welcome to episode 300, and this massive crowd goes nuts for like 30 seconds or something, then fades with the music. Dum, 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 here you go, Richardson and Stefan Sojka.
Hang on, no.
Weren't we doing this 6 years ago? We were sitting here 6 years ago trying to think of how to introduce the Skeptic Zone.
How do you start the Skeptic Zone?
How do you start the Skeptic Zone? But we've done it now for 300 episodes.
Is this recording? Shall we start again?
We should start again.
Okay, hang on.